when I stood up before, I didn't take the time to introduce myself, and I just thought it'd be a good idea for me to tell you a little bit about who I am. So I am a UK-based master of wine. I spent about 14 years as a retail supermarket buyer for 3 big UK supermarkets, and then worked for Tony Laithwaite, who sells wine around the world direct to consumer. Direct wines. And then since 2013, I've been an independent consultant on mostly the commercial side of wine, advising people on buying and on their commercial activities. And I became a trustee of the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation in 2021-22. And I was asked to do that not because I was an expert in regenerative, but because I was a well-connected person in the world of wine who was able to help with fundraising and building the organization from its very start. And in the course of that time, I have learnt a lot about regenerative farming, and I now do some teaching and advocacy for regenerative techniques and work to help the foundation achieve its goals. And I'll tell you a little about the foundation in the coming slides. Incidentally, also, my wife Amanda and I have owned a small vineyard in this region for over 20 years now. In fact, I first met Jean-Marc in South Africa 30 years ago, Jean-Marc. 1995, we both worked there, and Eliane, in fact. The 3 of us were working for, in fact, possibly some of the people that Jamie goes to visit in South Africa now, people like Ken Forrester and Martin Minot and Norma Radcliffe. We worked for them in South Africa. So when I bought a vineyard here, I actually started off working with some English friends, but then quite quickly came to say to Jean-Marc, could he help me? And he very kindly agreed, maybe he's regretting it, I'm not sure, to provide services to me to viticulture and premises to vinify. So my wine's made in Jean-Marc's winery at Château Saint-Roch. And we haven't been practicing all that time what I would consider regenerative farming, and I'm keen to do more. The one thing we do not do is till our soil, because we can't, because the vines are too close together. There's no machinery you can get between them. A horse maybe, but we've never tilled our soils. But we do some things that we would consider not regenerative enough, and I'm keen to experiment with more practices, but it's difficult. And for everything Jamie said about context, it's certainly clear that in this region with the dryness, there are some things that are easy to do and some things are not so easy to do. So I'm addressing these challenges at the moment, and we're talking about how to move forward. So I'm going to start by just saying, why is this whole topic so important? I won't read through that because we'll see that recur occasionally, but I'm just going to talk about what is sustainability. And it's the intersection effectively of the 3 circles of people, planet and profit. And it's certainly true that you can't be sustainable in business if you can't continue to make a profit. If you run out of money, you're dead, and then someone else takes your land and does what they want to do with it. So if you want to be sustainable, you have to be able to continue financially, but you also have to consider the planet and the people. And what's been happening is businesses have been focusing just on profit and forgetting the people and forgetting the planet. And in Europe, there are laws to control how people behave towards salaries and conditions of work. So in many ways in Europe, the people question isn't such a difficult one, although there are some problems in places like Champagne where there have been people using slave labor. So this is not devoid of problems in that world, but the planet has been ignored because we haven't been paying the bill for the damage we've been doing. We've been making damage on all our agricultural soils for years, and we haven't been paying the bill. So moving the slides, there we go. People talk a lot about climate change as being the problem. Now, for me, climate change is part of the human's impact on the planet, and biodiversity collapse is equally, possibly more, it's another symptom of the impact that humans are having. And I just want to share with you the fact that we're now calling the era in which we live the Anthropocene, the human era. And if you look at all these graphs, the inflection point where this dotted line is drawn is in around 1950. So post Second World War. If you look at the socioeconomic trends or Earth system trends, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, stratospheric ozone, many metrics, you can't read them all, but you can see how rapidly things have accelerated and how very, very few of them are actually moderating. The stratospheric ozone being one. If you remember 30 years ago, we talked about aerosols, the ozone layer. We did something, it has had an effect. So we are very rapidly changing our planet, and we do have to understand the impact we're having. An economist called Kate Raworth has written a book called Donut Economics, and that shows that this is the safe and just space for humanity to exist. Outside this is the ecological ceiling, things that if we go too far in this direction, the planet won't support our continuing existence. Ocean acidification, climate change, ozone layer, air pollution, biodiversity loss. Inside are the human factors that if we don't get right, the populations of the planet will not be able to continue, and they will, if there's not enough food, water, health, education, etc., people will not have lives they're happy with, and there will be huge movements of people, there will be revolutions, and we have to keep the social foundation secure. So that's where we need to be operating. And we have to think in those terms when we're thinking about what is the future of viticulture. These planetary boundaries are monitored by the Stockholm Resilience Centre. We've bust through 6 of them. In fact, I think the 7th, this slide is a year old, I think the 7th was announced as having been broken already. And we're not just past, this is the safe area, we're way past them in some cases. So, this is the context in which we're talking about. And things we've taken for granted, like pesticides, what happens is someone produces a product, they test it, it's proved to be safe, it's released, and then 10 to 15, 20 years later, people find they are starting to see problems. And when they finally show that there are problems, these can be cancers, they can be all sorts of diseases that take a long time to emerge. The way in which pesticides leach into the water, volatilize, decompose, run off, get into our plants and products is only becoming apparent now. So not to say that we can survive with zero pesticide use, but we have to understand we have to work out a way to use less and fewer of these chemicals. So one of the ways to do so is, why is this slide not stopping here? One of the quotes I most like about regenerative thinking is the most important piece of land is the 6 inches in between your ears. And I have your 6 inches between your ears here in this room, and I'm going to try and influence that just a little bit to help you understand a bit more about what regenerative thinking is about. I like the concept of systems thinking. I only found out about systems thinking recently, and I've realized that that's the way I think. It was actually invented by engineers who realized that linear thinking only got you so far. Complex systems act in networks, and they have loops of information that go around in circles rather than in straight lines. And a slide I rather like is this one here, which is in the classroom. You're being shown simplified A equals B, A to B, and actually you look outside and you go, well, biology particularly, the world of complex systems is much more difficult to simplify in a classroom. The world is quite complicated. So if you are thinking in a regenerative way, you are thinking, this is a natural piece of land that over several years was changed significantly. It had been farmed in thinking annually, thinking about a monoculture of products, manipulating the parts in a sort of command and control way, so that the people were trying to get a crop, they were trying to get a profit from that crop, and then think about what to plant the next year. And they moved to thinking about treating the landscape as a whole thing, to manage the whole, and to have a polyculture and a perennial mindset. So you can make a massive difference to a piece of land very quickly if you change the mindset of the way you think about managing it. And you can do that profitably with products that you can sell. It's not just letting go back to nature. This is not rewilding. So regenerative agriculture, its real origin was, here we go. Do you remember the Dust Bowl in the 1930s? That they over-farmed a lot of the land in central North America, to the extent where the soil just blew away because it had been tilled so often. And they realized back in those 20s and 30s that the problem was the tillage, and they started a practice of keeping roots in the soil all the time. And as soon as they took a crop out, they would plant something new. And that was really the beginning. It must be annoy French people, particularly Europeans, for the Americans to invent the word regenerative, and it's suddenly now become really popular. Well, actually agroecology has been practiced for a long time in Europe, and people have known these things for a long time. But regenerative agriculture has made a massive impact in the States because it's really being seen now as the solution for large farms, not just small farms, but it's growing to really quite a large proportion. And you can see that when you have very large farms, this is the kind of thing that results. You get feedlots with cattle on completely denuded land being fed maize and soya grown in Brazil. And then in Brazil, you've got these enormous tracts of forest ripped up to plant crops to feed the cattle. It's a terrible system. And in viticulture, we're not really part of that. But there are some industrially farmed wine regions, and we do have to think about the planetary impact. So the 5 principles of regenerative agriculture, and there's some great stuff to learn about this. John Kempf's podcast is a really good one. Diversity as much as possible, integration of livestock where you can, minimize soil disturbance, maintain living roots as long as you can, and protect the soil surface. So those, and around that, there are lots of practices, and we're talking about rotation of crops. We're talking about mulches, all those practices that Jamie referred to. So this brings us to the foundation. We have a mission to, well, the vision is that we have a sustainable future for vineyards, growers, and the planet. And in order to do that, we at the foundation are trying to inspire and empower the transition. So anyone who's farming grapes, to teach them show them how to do that in a way that moves towards a regenerative way of farming. And we'll talk a bit about what that means in a minute. We just set this target, which is to achieve 10% of the world's vineyards farmed regeneratively by 2035. 10% doesn't sound like much, but at the moment, biodynamic is 0.6%, something like that. Organic is about 7% of the world's vineyards. Some form of sustainability certification, maybe 20 to 30%, depending on which certification. Some of them are not very difficult to achieve. So 10% is a lot from a start of nearly 0. Many of the biodynamic people are already nearly regenerative. Some of their practices are very, very good, and some of them perhaps could be changed, but they're close to being regenerative. Some of the organic people also close to regenerative, but some are really not because they're using tillage a lot. So 10% by 2035. Jamie's talked through, in viticultural terms, the key principles. So I'm not going to spend too long on this, but I just wanted to share one thing, which was a wake-up moment for me when I realized that what we talked about the life in the soil, that only happens. In fact, all life on the planet only happens because of the sun. The sun provides the energy to do everything we do on this planet. Ultimately, the oil that we burn is old sunlight stored in the ground. So the sun provides everything, and the sun, in a vineyard context, is what shines on the vines. And any plant, as Jamie said, is a pump that pumps energy from the sunlight into the soil. And Jamie talked about 40%, I've said 20 to 40% of most plants is given to the community of creatures that live in the soil in order to enrich them. And this incredible network of things that live in the soil it's like a market down there. They're exchanging things with each other, eating each other, they're shitting, they're eating each other's shit. They do all sorts of weird stuff in the soil. And that life is what provides the plant with energy and with nutrients. So the plant can demand certain nutrients and the stuff in the soil will provide it. We don't need to put in lots of inputs from outside because most of those inputs can be created by the biology in the soil. So most of regenerative farming is thinking about improving your soil biology to effectively reduce or eliminate your need for any inputs. Now, in context is the important thing, but that is for me, that was the moment I thought, okay, you've got to understand why having plants growing in the soil as much as you can is important because it's pumping energy into the soil all the time. So excuse me. So this is a no-till system where you've got a cover crop which has been is cut and a new crop planted growing between the rows, and you can see carbon's being brought into the soil, water's going to soak into that soil, versus this dry soil that's been tilled where carbon and water are leaving the soil. So tillage, there's a French consultant who showed me this slide, and he said, okay, in which container did we heat treat the soil to kill all the biology? And it seems like a trick question. I mean, in some ways it is a trick question, because the answer is This one looks more healthy, yes? So you think probably the heat-treated one was probably that one, because that sounds like it's a bad thing to do. That was actually the one that was heat-treated. And the reason it's green is because the moment you kill everything, it decomposes. So you don't kill everything, you kill a lot of the larger creatures, and they start to decompose. And that mineralizes the nutrients that they contain. And then the plant can take them up. So the plant's feeding off the corpses of the dead creatures, whereas this one is the healthy biology inside the pot. So this is not sustainable because you've killed everything in the soil. And one of the reasons that people like tillage is because it gives you this short boost of fertility. A lot of the organic growers and biodynamic growers will talk to you about when you till the soil, you get the growth that comes afterwards. But that's actually because they're reducing the carbon in the soil. So this is a chart of microbial activity after tillage. Jean-Marc talked about the science behind regen, and what I really like about this, I'm quite scientifically minded. This is really good science. So this is heavy ploughing through to no-till. So a moldboard plough where you turn the soil right over. And this is the microbial activity afterwards. So basically you're causing the microbes to do a huge amount because they're dying and they're starting to eat each other. Here is the microbial activity. Here is the date you plough. That's the activity after the ploughing. And then the activity sinks to a much lower level because you've killed a lot of the creatures in the soil. So effectively, it's like opening a bottle of champagne and shaking it, letting all the bubbles go out. Then you have flat champagne. You have effectively flat soil after a deep till like that. So there's really good science that shows you this. This is well understood. We went to Penedès 2 years ago, and this is an over-tilled soil. The level is about 20 centimeters lower of the tilled soil, and you can see the vine roots are being exposed here because it's been tilled so often that the soil is just washing away. So if you remember, the 5 principles I showed you of regenerative agriculture are pretty much the same 5 principles here, but with one added. And it's probably the most important one, and it's to understand the context of your vineyard and your region. And this is exactly what Jamie was saying, that having a prescription that this is regenerative for all the world is just not possible because every climate, every context is different. And here in the Roussillon, for sure, that the lack of water has been an enormous problem. We're so pleased that there's been 500 millimeters of rain in the last few days. The roof of my house is leaking, but I'm not unhappy because my vines are happy. I'm just going to check on the time, see how long we've got. Oh, okay. So we at the RVF have identified 16 practices that we think are important for people to be thinking about. Many of them are effectively the same that Jamie's talked about. Some of them are sort of split into 2 or 3 around a similar topic. We also have something I'm going to tell you about later, which is the 17th, which is this 1 block challenge, which is an activity rather than a practice. But ground cover, managing the interrow, controlling weeds, etc. You can read that, and you can see that on the website of the RVF. But we like people to tell us which of these practices they're using, and we're building a map, which I'll show you in a minute, of who's using what. And we're trying to build that as we speak. So when I started thinking about this, and thinking about this is the kind of this topic about certification, thinking about how it was that we could get people who were conventionally farming to farm better, I was thinking, well, you can persuade them to become organic as the first step. And in some regions that makes sense, but in other regions it just does not make sense because the first thing it'll do is lose a lot of yield. The massive number, the 80% of vineyards that are still farmed conventionally, can move in this direction much more easily in many regions than they can move in that direction. So sustainability programs, by and large, exist to say, come on, guys, you can get better. And so I'm mapping some certifications on here. And I haven't put them in any particular place, but these are just sustainable certifications around the world. These are some of the new regenerative certifications. These are the ones that don't require organic certification. These are the ones that do require organic certification. And then these are the organic certifiers who are not necessarily regenerative. So that's pretty much the landscape. And I'm sure there's 1 or 2 new ones since I created this slide. These 2 biodynamic ones I put sort of halfway between because they're not setting out to claim to be regenerative, but many of the practices that they require are actually really good for soil health. And so they sort of deserve to sit somewhere between. And our intention as the foundation is to get people to say, come on, stop being conventional, move towards, through sustainability, towards being regenerative. That's our message. And we think that it's great if people can or want to move in a zero chemical direction. If they can do that, that's fantastic. But in some contexts, that's not possible, as well as, you know, the price point. Sorry, I keep on bumping into this table. No more water. So the last thing, second last thing I wanted to say was, you know, is this evidenced, or is this just some sort of romantic ideal? And the answer is yes, it really is. The evidence is really growing, and it's been fairly early on that we have started studying what goes on under the soil in such intensity. And so a lot of this is new science. But in the agriculture world, there's loads of studies that say if you move from conventional to regenerative, this is the revenue and cost per hectare in a cornfield. And it was shown that in conventional growing, you have this amount of revenue and that amount of cost and that amount of profit. And when you move towards regenerative, you actually have higher revenue, possibly because you sell your product for more, possibly because you can get higher yields with regenerative farming, but your costs are way lower. So suddenly you also have more profit. I'm not promising this is the case with vines. It's much more difficult, but there are very many fewer studies. But I do have a study to show you. That's just a water holding. So there's lots of evidence of scientific things like water holding capacity is very clearly significantly increased with regenerative practices. But I want to share with you a study that O'Neill did in California. So one of the fellow trustees of the foundation has been working at O'Neill for 5 years, and he put in place a 5-year conversion journey where he took a part of their land and converted it to regenerative farming. And he did it as an open trial, and he wanted to show the industry how it worked. He had quarterly field days where people came to visit. He found over those 5 years that he managed to increase organic matter by 70%, soil carbon by 74%, an extra 12 tons per hectare, I think, of organic matter. In 4 out of 5 years, they actually increased the yield. This is grapes, this is in California. An average of 5% increase. And he did increase his costs of farming because they had to learn new techniques. They had to buy a bit of new equipment. His cost of farming was higher, but this is the first 3 years actually only. You can see there were increased costs, but they got increased costs of 10% to 9% to 7%, and they're now almost at parity. So now they've learned how to farm like this. The costs are no greater, and generally the yields are, as I said, 4 years out of 5 better. One of the things the RVF, I'm aware that there's the Revue de Vin de France, and they have the same initials, RVF, so forgive me if I talk about the RVF as the initials of the foundation. We ran a literature review, which was to study every single scientific paper that we could find that studied anything that we thought was relevant to regenerative farming. Very comprehensive piece of work, took about 1.5 years. At the end, we found there is very good evidence for the effectiveness of cover crops. Much of this would have been the work of Monsieur Deloire here in the front row, who's contributed some of the studies that we looked at. Cover crops, mulches, natural predators, organic amendments, biological stimulants and control agents. Very good evidence for all of those things. Now, obviously, each one in its own context, but there is a science base behind the farming of regenerative farming. So what is the foundation doing to try and spread the word? And there's 2 main things that we are trying to achieve. One is that we just launched a network of vineyards online who can sign up and say, I'm doing some regenerative practices. So if a journalist wants to find someone who's practicing in Germany or in California, they can go onto our website. Now, it's early days. We've got, I think, 200 or 300 vineyards on there at the moment. We're wanting to spread that message and get people to put their details on. A lot of people are thinking, well, I'm trying a practice or 2. I don't think I'm quite there yet. So I'm putting my details on, but I'm not showing them. So we've got quite a few people who've put their details on, but they're not publicly visible on the map. But we're wanting to expand that and do that fast. So yeah, we've got quite a few in the UK because there are 3 of us are based in the UK. So we have a really good network of UK regenerators. What you do is very simple. It's 15 minutes. You sign up. This is not audited. This is self-certified. So we're relying on people to say, well, I'm doing this. they're publicly exposing themselves to say, I'm doing this, people can check, but they answer a questionnaire, the 16 practices, what are they doing, and then they can put themselves on the map. We have also launched 1 year ago, about a week ago, in Paso Robles in California, we launched something we call the One Block Challenge, which is to say to any grower, anywhere around the world, if they want to dedicate a part of their vineyard, a block, a hectare, a half hectare, 10 hectares if they're big, and devote that to regenerative practices, then we will guide them and we will show them how to do that. We'll help them form a group locally and help them visit each other's farms. And it's exploded in the States. In Paso Robles, there are 50 or 60 people joining in. More than 50% of the vineyard area of Paso Robles are represented in this group. They're not farming that all regeneratively, they're all doing a block, but they're all starting to go down the road, and that's what we want them to do. And then this next picture. It's not moving. Oh, pressing the wrong button. There we go. Napa, Paso Robles. We've got Sonoma coming soon. There's Texas. There's one in Temecula, UK, South Africa, New Zealand. These have all started within the year, and we are keen to start those in Europe. And so we're talking to a few people about how we might do that in Provence, potentially even in the Roussillon, Languedoc-Roussillon. There's a lot of interest in Bordeaux, and we're a charity of 1.5 employees and 8 trustees. So we're trying to make sure this can be done by getting the energy of the people locally and the groups that exist already to say, well, look, we'll do this. We'll get the network together and we'll create a one block challenge. So yeah, the website is a really good resource to check out if you want to know more. Timing wise, I think we're pretty much there. Yeah, we have 5 minutes for questions. That's great. Thank you very much. Now, if there's anyone with a question, please put your hand up and we'll get you a microphone.